we have a 10-year-old, and so we actually homeschool, and so we think a lot about this. So I think the way to think about the impact of AI on people, on specifically people as individuals, I think it's actually, a lot of people just focus on kind of this kind of very, I would say, straightforward and or overly simplistic view of just literally job gains, job losses, which we could talk about. But there's two specific things at the level of like an individual person or an individual kid. So I think it's pretty clear that AI is going to take people who are good at doing things and it's going to make them very good at doing things, right? And so it's going to be a tool that's going to sort of raise the average kind of across the board. And look, you see that playing out already. Anybody who's in a position where they need to write something or design something or write code or whatever, if they're pretty good at it today, they use AI, and all of a sudden they're very good at it. And so there's sort of that aspect to it. And I think the way the education system writ large is going to kind of teach AI is going to be based, hopefully a lot on that. But then there's this other thing that's happening, which we're also starting to see, and we're really seeing it particularly in coding right now, where the really great people are becoming like spectacularly great, right? And so you kind of use the term. You think about like the super empowered individual, right? So the individual who is like really good at coding, or really good at making movies, or really good at making songs, or really good at designing, making art, or whatever those things are, or podcasting, or hopefully venture capital. If you're very good at it and you can really harness AI, you can become spectacularly great. And like super productive, right? And I'm sure you have a lot of friends in this category as well. But like the really really good coders are experiencing this right now. My friends who are really good coders are like, oh my god, all of a sudden I'm not twice as good as I used to be. I'm like 10 times as good as I used to be. And so I think at the unit of like n equals 1 of like an individual kid, I think the question is kind of how do you get them in a position where they're kind of this kind of super empowered individual, such that they're going to be really kind of deep in whatever it is they're going to do, but they're going to be deep in a way that's going to let them fully use the power of AI to be not just great, but to be like spectacularly great. And I think that's going to be the real, that's the real opportunity, and that at least that's what we're shooting for, and that's what I would encourage parents to shoot for.
So what I heard there is essentially agency. This word that we see on Twitter all the time is building agency. Them not waiting for someone to tell them what to do, figuring out what to do.
Yeah. So this thing with this term agency that's become very, very, very popular, certainly in California for the last couple of years. It's really interesting because it's. I had a lot of trouble with this early on because I'm like, agency. Okay, what are they talking about? And what they're kind of talking about is like initiative, willingness to you could just do things. What is it? The Samuel Berger has the great term live player. You can be like a primary participant in events. And at first I was like, well, yeah, like that's kind of obvious, right? Like, of course. And then I'm like, oh, actually, it's not so obvious anymore because kind of your point, I think so much of our society is based on like, there are all these rules and everybody gets taught kind of by default, you're supposed to follow all these rules, right? And then everybody, if you like break the rules, like everybody gets freaked out. It's like, oh my God, he broke the rules. And so like we have somehow worked our way kind of, I don't know, psychologically, sociologically, kind of into a state in which I guess the natural assumption for a lot of people is, the thing that you for example, the thing you want to train kids to do is like follow all the rules. And, you could argue that kind of, for example, the school system, the K through 12 school system or whatever has gotten kind of more and more focused on it over time. And it's like, no, you should actually, and again, especially unit n equals 1, like of your kid. It's like, okay, and look, there's something to be had. I just had this conversation with my 10-year-old last night. Actually, I rolled out, the concept of, in order to lead, you must first learn to obey, right? In order to, issue orders, you must learn how to follow orders, and kind of trying to keep him with some level of structure in his life, and not just pure agency. But yeah, I mean, so look, some rules are important and so forth. But yeah, no, look, there is like there's just a huge premium in life on being somebody who is able to like fully take responsibility for things, fully take charge, run an organization, lead a project, create something new. And maybe that has been maybe a little bit diminished in our culture over the last 30 years. It's healthy, that there's now a term for that is coming back into vogue. And again, that's how I view AI for kids is like, okay, AI should be the ultimate lever on the world for a kid with agency to be able to say, okay, I can actually be a primary contributor, right? Whether that's I can be a primary contributor in everything from, developing new areas of physics to writing code to being an artist, to writing novels, like, whatever that thing is, I can fully participate in the world. I can really change things. And the combination of that idea combined with this technology feels very healthy to me.
What is that quote about? Give me a lever and I'll move the world.
And I'll move the world. Yeah, that's exactly right. Well, so it's actually funny you mentioned that. So the early kind of scientists, including like Isaac Newton, were super obsessed with this concept of alchemy, right? It's like they developed like Newton. He's like developed Newtonian physics and he developed like calculus and all these things. But the thing he was really obsessed with was alchemy, which was the thing he could never get to work, right? And alchemy was the transmutation of lead into gold, which meant the transmutation of something that was very common, which was lead, into something that was very rare and valuable, which was gold. And there was this. He spent decades trying to figure out this thing called the philosopher's stone, which would be basically the machine or the process that would be able to transmute the rare, the common thing into the rare thing, lead into gold. And he never figured it out. And it's incredibly frustrating. Nobody ever figured that out. And now we literally with AI have a technology that transfers sand into thought.
Right? Just blew my mind.
Right, the most common thing in the world, which is sand, converted into the most rare thing in the world, which is thought. Right, and so AI is the philosopher's stone. Like it is that. It actually is that, and it's just this incredibly powerful tool. And that's where I get so excited. I mean, and again, this is what we're doing with our 10-year-old, which is like, all right, a primary thing that we want to make sure to do is to make sure that he knows fully how to leverage and get benefit out of the philosopher's stone, right? Which is to say AI, and that's certainly central to everything we're teaching him. There's this meme going around that Silicon Valley people don't let their kids use computers, and I there may be a handful of people who are like that. I don't know. I think it's more honestly the other way around, which is the more you're kind of plugged into stuff in Silicon Valley, the more important it is to make sure that your kids actually fully understand this and know how to use it. And that's certainly the mode that we're in. And that's certainly the mode that I would encourage parents to think about.
I did not know your kid was homeschooled. That is super interesting. It's almost a statement on, education in today's day. Maybe is there any thoughts there? I'm just, for folks that maybe aren't in your tax bracket that want to help their kids be successful, maybe homeschool, maybe not, what advice would you have?
This is the challenge. And again, this kind of goes to how your original question, which is education. There's two completely different ways to think about education. The way that's usually thought about and talked about is kind of at the level of like a nation, right? So it's like a national level issue or maybe a state level issue in the U.S., which is basically like, how do you educate all the kids? And of course, that's incredibly important. And of course, you're going to need like some level of large scale system, like the national K through 12 school system or something like that, in order to do that. But then there's this other question, which is like at n equals 1 for an individual kid. Like, what can you do with an individual kid? And so I'll just give you kind of the ultimate answer to that question, which is it's been known for centuries that the ideal way to teach a kid at the unit of n equals 1, by far the ideal way to do it is with one-on-one tutoring. Like if you just have an individual kid and the goal is to maximize an individual kid, by far you get the best results with one-on-one tutoring. And this is something that like every royal family knew in history. It's something that every aristocratic class knew in history. There's all these amazing examples. Alexander the Great was tutored by Aristotle. He took over the world, right? Like, many of the great kings and queens and, royal families and aristocrats and so forth, over the course of centuries, kind of always had this approach. There's actually also statistical evidence, analytical evidence that this is correct. There's this, massive question in the field of education, which is how do you improve educational outcomes? And basically it turns out it's very hard to improve educational outcomes, except there's one method that always does it, which is called the Bloom 2 sigma effect, which is there's one method of education that routinely raises student outcomes by 2 standards of deviation. And we'll take a kid from the 50th percentile to the 99th percentile, and that's one-on-one tutoring, right? So again, right, if you go back to like at n equals 1, you have like a kid and a tutor, and they're in this like, very tight loop with each other, where the kid is able to constantly kind of be on the leading edge of what they're capable of doing, and they can move incredibly fast, and they get kind of correction in real time. You get these better outcomes. But, to your question, like it's never been economically feasible for anybody other than the richest people in society to be able to provide one-on-one tutoring for kids. AI provides the very real prospect of being able to do that, right? Because obviously now, right, if you have a kid that's like super interested in something and they can talk to, an LLM about it, and they can ask an infinite number of questions and they can get instantaneous feedback. And in fact, you can even tell an LLM, it's like, teach me how to do the following. And you can say, wow, that's like, I don't quite understand what you're saying. Like, dumb it down for me a little bit. Okay, now quiz me, do I actually understand this? Like people can just do this today. Right. And so I think there's this like massive opportunity for parents, in many walks of life to be, with a little bit of time and focus, to be able to say, okay, my kid's probably still going to go through a traditional education system, but I'm going to augment this with AI tutoring. And of course, there's going to be tons of startups, right? And there already are that are going to try to build on all the products and services for this.